sake of those who were online, okay, well, it just turned 7 p.m., and I know it's not the most pleasant evening to be out and about, dark and cold and wet, but at least it's a little different than the conditions we saw Sunday night, which was, I drove home Sunday night and it was pretty treacherous, just real easy going. One of the things leading into our session this evening, for those who came out in person here into the church, and those who are online watching the streamed service, or for those even who will watch the YouTube saved video, is I promised at the beginning of this session that we would cover all 7 sacraments. And it's my belief as pastor that no one should be confirmed in the church who doesn't understand the 7 sacraments, because of all of the things that happen, there's only 7 sacraments, and at least something about them, even to explain to a neighbor, a friend, a co-worker. Somebody say, well, what does the Catholic Church teach about baptism or confirmation? Tonight the topic is marriage, the sacrament of marriage, and it's a beautiful sacrament. As a priest, I have officiated a lot of marriages, and hardly a day in the parish goes by that I don't talk to a couple or meet with them or send a letter. I just sent a letter this morning to a chapel in Arizona where one of our couples is going to get married, or to have a planning for a rehearsal or for a wedding. So anyway, January I think is the only month of the year where we usually don't have any marriages, but we do have at least a couple scheduled in February, and then from then on the year stays pretty busy. Right before I'll introduce our presenters for this evening, a couple of years ago, Pope Francis, and as the Pope, he's like the supreme pastor of the church. So the Pope has, since the decision over the liturgical year, we had Deacon John spoke about that last month, the liturgical year, setting the feast days and all of the things. That's one of his roles. And when he puts something out, he expects the whole church, more than 1 billion Catholics to, accept that. So a couple of years ago, he designated the 3rd Sunday of Ordinary Time, which is this weekend, as the Word of God Sunday. And his emphasis, he wrote a beautiful letter that came with the implementation of this feast, is an encouragement for Catholics and any other Christians of goodwill to spend time reading, studying, and praying with the Scriptures. So I will emphasize that in the homilies this weekend and remind people of the treasure of Scripture. And I can just say that in my own experience, before I was about 25 or so, that I knew very little of what was in the Bible, other than things like Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark, David and Goliath, and I knew Bethlehem and Nazareth, that type of thing. But I actually knew very little about Scripture. And when I read the New Testament in my mid-20s, my grandmother had sent me a Bible for my birthday. I read the New Testament in 3 months, about 15 minutes a night. My eyes were open, and I really could understand the tremendous treasure that we have in the Scriptures. And I've since read pretty much everything else, but that I started with the New Testament, and it really is timeless for us. And for me, the experience was that God was speaking to me, and that really led to a deeper experience of faith that eventually would prepare me to hear the call of the Lord to serve in holy orders. So just a reminder for this weekend and for the future as well, for anyone who hears this broadcast, to remember the importance of the Word of God and be emphasized here on the third Sunday of Ordinary Time. Okay, well, we have a great presentation this evening on the sacrament of marriage and some of the ins and outs, the ups and downs, but the perseverance in a life of grace. I had a situation once where I was giving a couple of blessing on their 50th anniversary, and they were pretty jovial, and the bride said, "We met in a roller rink, and we've been going round and round ever since." So with that as an introduction, Tracy and Cindy.
Good evening, everyone. This is my wife, Cindy. I know you've all heard stories about her. Yeah, we'll get into that. But first,
I'm hiding a halo under my hat. So go ahead.
So yeah, it'll be a comedy hour. Let's go ahead and get to it here. Okay, so first let's start off with one scripture that I thought was good when it comes to marriage. It's a Song of Solomon. Chapter 8, verse 6 through 7. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm, for the love is strong as death, jealousy is fierce as the grave, its flashes are flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If a man offered for love all the wealth of his house, he would be utterly despised. So that's kind of how sometimes I feel about my relationship with Cindy. It's kind of, you go through those ups and downs, and times she's very fiery. So first, what I like to do is have her take a couple of minutes, and and I may have to reel her in because she does like to talk. And
Because I won't be able to talk in the next couple of weeks.
So
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay, so first I'll tell you how we met. So we were both 25, and we worked for the same company. I was just been promoted to store manager of a company called Standard Paint, based out of California. And Standard Paint was like a precursor to the Home Depot and the Lowe's that you see now. It wasn't quite as big, but we carried everything. And back then, we didn't have computers, so your directory for calling the main office to talk to buyers of different products was a notebook. So flipping through the notebook, I had a customer looking for an art brush, which we didn't carry in the store because back in 1987, that art brush was $50 for a little fan brush. I don't know what it was made out of, but it was expensive back then. Anyway, so I called I was calling Tracy, who I thought was a female. I thought Tracy was the buyer. So when I called and Tracy answered, I thought he was Tracy's assistant. And then through the conversation about how to get this art brush, blah, 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 found out that, oh, he's Tracy. I'd never heard a man named Tracy before. So we're talking business, and then I told him what store I was with, and he said, oh, in his awesome Texas accent that he used to have, he said, oh, you're the gal from the Torrance store. They're hosting a get-together for you at the Houlihan's bar for your getting promoted. And I'm like, yeah. He says, I've heard a lot of good things about you. That's all he said, other than the paintbrush. And I kid you not, after I hung up the phone with him, I called my aunt, and I said, I don't care if this man is short, fat, bald, or ugly. I'm in love. So then he came into my store, so that was on a Monday. He came into the store on Wednesday with a vendor who was selling some art boxes, and I typically wasn't attracted to guys with dark hair. I grew up in California, Southern California, surfer boys, the whole thing. So here comes Tracy Newman walking in cowboy boots, his brown and gray polyester Hanes dress slacks, a pastel pink Oxford shirt, and his paisley tie. And I don't know, was in love. So Friday comes along, supposed to go to Houlihan's, and this guy that was selling Sunset magazine, which, and I don't know if they ever carried it out here, but California was like for homeowners, like gardening and things like that, was always flirting with me in the store and said, hey, can I meet you at Houlihan's? I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. I wasn't really interested in the guy, but I'm like, yeah, whatever. So I wasn't even going to go because I would be at work at 5:30 in the morning. I was exhausted. But then I said, oh, that guy Tracy's going to be there. I should go. So I went. He was the last guy to show up because I later found out that Tracy was always the first one to work and the last one to leave. And from then on, I just knew that he was the one. And I tell him even today that God knew I needed somebody like him, and God brought him to me. He was born 8 days after me. He wanted a younger woman, but not too young, or older woman, but not too old.
A little bit of experience.
Yeah, just a little, that 8 days makes a lot of difference. They do say women do mature faster than men, so I was really technically like 2, 3, maybe 5 years older than him at that time. But anyway, so we dated. We were engaged and married within 7 months of meeting, and
Hold on. So one story that I've got to tell that she criticizes me a lot on now, but looking back, I was really thrifty, and so we met at the bar, and then she was working the next day. I actually had a date the next day,
yeah.
and but I took the girl to a restaurant that had ribs, and I told
Love's.
it's called Love's Ribs, very good, and basically told her at that. When I was there, I said, well, look, this will probably be the last time that we see each other. And so she got upset. So I took her a rack of ribs, put it in the car, and then took her home and dropped her off. And I called Cindy and said, hey, what are you doing after work? And, are you hungry? And basically took the ribs and gave her the other woman's ribs.
And I didn't know this until after we were married, that my husband served another woman's leftover ribs to me. I was like, what the hell? So anyway, like I said, I truly believe that God brought Tracy, created Tracy, and brought him into my life. There's no other explanation as to why. It wasn't typical of me to fall in love with someone I had never met. It wasn't typical of me to be in love with somebody the first time I saw him. It just, everything seemed to work. It definitely wasn't typical of me to be engaged. I mean, and married within 7 months to really, a lot of people say, oh, you got to date for several years, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. Well, that wasn't how we did. So let's get to the proposal. Okay. I'm going to take a survey after he explains his version because it's so wrong. So we went to, we go to Mass. He has this ring blessed. And then we go up on a hill overlooking the Pacific Ocean.
Did you see the ring?
No, I didn't see the ring. I saw a box. Okay, and we all know what a ring box looks like. So anyway, so we're up on the hill, and he asks me, as he presents the ring to me, will you help me to my rocking chair when we're old and gray? And then puts the ring on my finger. And I said, hell yeah. So we're walking back to the car, and he says, don't you have anything to ask me? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, well, don't you want to ask me anything? I'm like what? He says, I said, fine, will you marry me too? Yeah, see, you asked me first. So now let him explain his, and then I'm going to
Okay, so we'll take the survey afterwards. So what really happened was we did go to Mass. I had a box had it in my pocket. I had it in my hand, and she snatched it out of my hand, opened it up, and took it. And so I was like, at that point I was a little unsure of what was going to happen. And then she got down on one knee and asked me to marry her. So I said that because I presented a ring, that she snatched, I did not propose first. She asked me to marry her. I did not ask her.
And like I always
We have an attorney in the house.
Yeah, okay. So like I always say, the presentation of a ring, putting it on my wedding finger, or engagement finger is an implication of a contract. So therefore, he asked me first. I may have said the words, will you marry me, but we weren't going to live together forever, so how else am I going to help him to his chair when he's old and gray? Little did he know he's going to have to help me to a rocking chair before I help him, because my body seems to be whatever. So,
So who believes my story over hers?
okay, all those that believe in my story, raise your hand. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, now the right guys. Okay.
You got
Got a
two.
few.
Hey, you agreed to both sides. You're just trying to save face
playing
over
them
there. So, okay, so,
So one thing that is kind of tied back to this is that, with the sacrament, marriage wasn't always a sacrament. It became a sacrament actually at the time of Jesus. Before that, it was like a civil contract. And so God came back, or Jesus said, he took this contract, this exchange of marital consent between a man and a woman, and changed the contract to a sacrament, making it a conveyor of grace. So not exactly sure when that timing was. Some believe that it was like at the wedding of Canaan. And if you heard any of the homilies last week, that was the main feature of the homilies. So
the sacrament of marriage is also considered a vocation. And like any vocation, you have good times, you have bad times. You have struggles. And like I tell my children, or our children, we've always told them that marriage is a job. It's not what you see on TV, you fall in love, everything's great, you're always just head over heels in love and nothing happens, because that's not reality. We've been married 34 years, and there's times when we're on parallel tracks, where we're just, doing our thing, but we still love each other, but we have to work harder at that communion. And then there's times where we're just in sync all the way. And just like I always believe, I guess Tracy has told you that I grew up in foster homes and had a lot of struggles as a child and young adult. And I never, throughout my life, we were talking about it yesterday, I don't know how I knew, but I just knew that God was with me. I don't know how I knew, even as a 4- and 5-year-old child, that what was happening to me wasn't God's fault, that we have free will, and that it was the men and women who were caring for me, they were responsible, not God. So I've never had a moment of anger towards God. I just knew, again, I don't know how, that he was with me. And that's why when Tracy came into my life, that's why I believe so strongly that he was a gift from God for me, because I needed somebody who was strong, but had compassion, love, understanding, patience, trust me, patience, and
she's not kidding.
no, I'm ADHD to the nth degree. What comes in my brain comes out my mouth. Father Mark one time said, I know that I'll always hear the truth from you. And I said, because my brain, I don't have enough time to create a lie before it comes out my mouth. So whatever I say is, it's like, not everybody can handle that. But thank God that Tracy was my gift from God. So even he lost his job 2 days after Christmas one year when our kids were young. Our son was 5, our daughter was 3, and we had just paid off all of our bills. That excitement when you get all your bills paid off. But we didn't have any savings after paying off all our bills. So we're like, okay, he's working, we'll save the money and blah, blah, blah. Well, losing your job 2 days after Christmas doesn't allow you to save that money. I mean, we were back to paying our groceries with credit card and whatever. And I explained to Tracy, I said, look, he didn't know what he was going to do because it was unexpected. It was a political decision. It had nothing to do with his work performance. And I said, I know how to be poor because I grew up poor. I moved out of my house before I finished high school. I finished high school, but I moved out as soon as I turned 18. I moved out of the last home I lived in. I lived for almost an entire year. I couldn't afford, in California, we cook with gas, a lot of the apartments. So I was able to find an apartment for like $500, $600 a month that came with the electricity and water, but no gas. and I had a gas stove. So, and back then you rented a phone, you didn't have a phone like this, or even a phone you plugged in that was your own. You actually rented your phone from Southwest Bell Company. So I didn't even have enough money to rent the phone, so I could have a phone in my house. Somebody had given me a TV, and the TV had tubes. I couldn't afford to fix the tubes. So somebody had given me an electric popcorn popper, so I would go to the grocery store, buy eggs, cheap cheese, tortillas, and milk, and then I'd buy oranges on the street, because you could buy a bag of oranges for like $1. And that's what I ate every day. So when he lost his job, I said, whatever you want, if you want to go work at McDonald's, work at McDonald's. I know how to be poor. As long as we have a roof over our head, clothes on our back, and food on our stomach, we're not poor. So we've had those kind of trials and tribulations, you know. And I remember when he lost his job, for whatever reason, I just happened to open the Bible to just random, and the verse fit the struggle that we were going through. And it was so amazing to me how God is able to, when I think about this Bible and how old it is, and the things in the Bible are still relevant today as they were when they were written, when they were transcribed. I mean, it's just amazing to me. If you guys ever have an opportunity to do either the Lenten retreat or the Advent retreat, where you read scripture from the Old Testament and one from the New Testament, and you discuss with your spiritual leader, guide, it's just amazing how even the Old Testament and the New Testament, the verses coincide with each other. You know, like when you attend Mass, the Old Testament verse and the New Testament verse is so, and they all tie back with the gospel. It's just amazing to me that something so old can have so much relevant life information. So I wasn't born Catholic. I chose to be Catholic as an adult, because the only two faiths that in foster homes, the only two families that were good to me was a Jewish family and a Catholic family. And because I already knew Jesus, I went with Catholic. But anyway.
So one thing, Cindy's birth mother was Jewish. And so many years later, as I used to coach a women's ice hockey team. And that's a whole lot of stories that we can
Not
go
appropriate
down.
in church.
Not appropriate in church. But anyway, one of the players was Jewish. And so when I told her that Cindy was Catholic, but she is also born Jew, she said, oh, she's a cashew.
Yeah, so I'm
So
a
that's
cashew.
what we call her now.
Yeah.
She's my cashew.
Because I was born Jewish and I'll die Jewish, but people don't understand you can be Jewish and not practice Judaism, right?
So one of the things that happened after, just keep going down, I guess, the timeline, is after I lost my job, it was like, okay, what am I going to do? And I had a job offer 2 days later from Home Depot. It would have required us relocating to Florida. And basically, I flew out for the interview. They talked about everything. They even talked about how their divorce rate was 50% higher than the average because of what their expectations were. And that after it, I think it was 2 years, you were available for a sabbatical. So, I mean, basically, they were just going to eat you up and grind you out. And so, still not knowing what I was going to do, I told them no. And flew home and told Cindy, and said, well, if I wanted out of the marriage, I just blew the opportunity. But started working with a friend, basically becoming a manufacturer's rep and selling products into the home centers. Before I was a buyer. And so when we started doing that, I looked at the business differently. Before it was all geographically based. So we lived in San Antonio, so the typical territory would be Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, maybe Louisiana.
Rhode Island, Chicago,
No.
Michigan.
So with that, I said I didn't want to do that because I had relationships with major companies, in California. Home Depot had 9 buying offices across the country, and I knew people in several of those buying offices. So I said, I want specific accounts. And so it took a while to find enough companies to get on board with that. And basically that first 6 months didn't make a dime. It's all based on commission. But in that first year, at the end of that first year, I had made more than I had as a buyer. And then the second year, I doubled that. And the third year, I tripled that. But part of that also came sacrifices in the sense that I traveled a lot. And so...
It wasn't necessarily a bad thing, just gonna put that out there.
Yeah, so probably, how old were the kids, like 8 and 6?
No, they were 5 and 3.
Okay.
But, yeah, they were young. So basically, people would ask me, because both kids started playing ice hockey. My daughter did gymnastics. They both played in the CYO, did karate, the whole 9 yards. So I was like, go, 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 from the minute they got out of school until it was bedtime. And somebody asked me, one of my friends said, how do you do it? Tracy travels every single week, and he's not home until Friday night, and he leaves first thing Monday. I said, it's easy. It's like being a divorced woman with a boyfriend, a good alimony check, and a boyfriend that shows up on the weekends. So it was, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, basically.
And then the other thing was, and I didn't travel every week, but I traveled probably 44 weeks out of the year. And if I was home for a couple of weeks, God forbid 3 weeks, I mean, she would be, like, okay,
yeah, how
when
do
are
I,
you leaving?
yeah, do you need me to help you pack? Is there anything I can do? And the reason why is if any of you have experienced divorce, whether growing up or whatever, there's always the bad guy and the good guy. So because I was the primary caregiver, I was also the disciplinarian, and then my children decided they wanted to be homeschooled, so I was the teacher. So I was the mean guy. And here comes Tracy on his white horse after being gone for a week, and he's like, oh, daddy, right? And mommy's so mean, and I have to say, again, what a gift God gave when he brought Tracy into my life, because he was an amazing father. Even though he traveled, he still was home every weekend, 99% of the time, to help coach the kids hockey, to attend their, hockey games or their sporting activities. And he did, the kids still, our son is 32 and he has 3 little girls of his own. And he talks all the time about how dad would come home and wrestle with them and how much fun they had. They were always laughing with dad. But it made me look like I was the evil stepmother, right? Because not only was I their mother, but I was their chauffeur and I was their teacher. So
everybody has a role.
Yeah, I had. Poor Tracy, sometimes he would call, especially as our children got older, and because of the environment that I grew up, I didn't want to repeat any of those experiences for our children. Our children were called the Toys R Us kids. They had a lot of toys because I wanted to play with them. And I would get down on the floor and play with them. We'd play with Legos, we'd go out and play street hockey. We would, one day we built a Connects roller coaster in the living room. I mean, I had very few rules. The rules that I had were they had to respect, they had to help around the house, no talking back, and when they started up something, whether it was a sport or an extracurricular activity, they had to see it through for the entire year. They couldn't quit because they didn't like the coach, or they had to, because I felt like you can learn as much, if not more, from a bad experience than a good experience. So, teaches you how to persevere. But poor Tracy, like our son was 12. Both our kids have ADHD because I gifted them that special. I mean, I think it's a gift myself, but not everybody does. But I had gone into my son's room and, I had labeled everything so they knew where to put all their stuff. And his room looked like a bomb had gone off in there. And I told him, our son's name is Justice. I told him, I said, you have 3 days to clean everything up. And what's not put away, I'm coming in with trash bags and I'm taking it away. Came in 3 days later, and it was worse, if that's even possible, than it was 3 days. So I brought in some black trash bags and I started grabbing the stuff. Well, he grabbed my arm. Something about boys, when they get taller than moms, they all of a sudden think that, mom doesn't know anything. So I have a black belt in karate, so I put him in a wrist lock and put him down on the ground, which right away he starts bawling his eyes out. You tried to break my arm. I said, if I wanted to, I would have. I'm calling the cops. So I got our portable phone and I told him, I said, the digits are 911. but understand what will happen once you dial those digits. The police will come, they will investigate, they will remove you from the house, and because you're accusing me of abuse, they'll also remove your sister. You have hockey practice tonight. They're not taking you to hockey practice, and because you're a 12-year-old boy, they're not even putting you in a nice foster home. You're going either to a group home or juvenile hall, where there are really bad kids. You're not a bad kid, you're just having a temper tantrum. And he says, I hate you. I said, well, I'm not a fan of yours either. He says, I don't want to live here anymore. So he had a 12-year-old boy, a bag with Snoopy on it, a suitcase. So I opened the suitcase, I put 5 pairs of underwear, 5 shorts, 5 shirts, his socks, a blanket, teddy bear, and a book. Went down the stairs, opened the front door, threw it on the front porch, and I said, where are you living? You can't make me leave. You have to. I said, I pay rent, you don't, or the house mortgage. So I explained to him, now I took everything out of his room. And I said, and having your own bedroom is a privilege, it's not a right. Having new clothes is a privilege, it's not a right. Having food in your stomach is a privilege, it's not a right. Having somebody to love you is a privilege, it's not a right. I said, so you will sleep on the couch, you've lost the privilege of a room, you will, when you wear out those 5 clothes are dirty, you will do the laundry for them, and you will have to earn every single thing in your room back. So go ahead.
So from my point of view on this, it's a couple of things, because it kind of led up to this. So I was gone for about 2 weeks during this period. First, I went to the West Coast, then to the East Coast, and then I was in China and just coming back from China. And I walk into the house, and I go in and check on the kids. I think Justice was on the floor sleeping.
No, he should have been on the couch.
But I'm looking in his room, and there's nothing in his room. It's like, I can't even tell you exactly what I said because we're in a church. But I walk into our bedroom. His bed is leaning up against the wall. Everything in his room is in our bedroom. It's just like, okay, well, maybe I can leave tomorrow. Yeah. But no, it was. We were consistently on the same page when it come to raising the kids, and
Which is very important.
yeah. I mean, interestingly enough, the only issues that we really ran into where we had, issues was really over family, and it's typically my family. So, we were able to stay on the same page, and sometimes it was convincing each other, having conversation about it, and not always agreeing about it, but being able to talk through it. And one piece of advice, especially early in a marriage, that we took was never go to bed angry. So there's sometimes you didn't sleep, because she would always want to talk when I was the tiredest. That's when she'd want to have the these heartfelt conversations.
Well, first off, this man can go to sleep like that. His head hasn't even touched the pillow, and he's out. Me, I'm an insomniac, so I hate the fact that he could go to sleep like that. But he also gets up at the ass crack of dawn, which I have no unearthly idea of why somebody would want to get up that early in the morning. I'd rather stay up all night. Like tomorrow I have surgery, I have to be there at 5:45. I won't go to bed tonight because if I go to bed, it'll be just terrible trying to wake up. So, and he's in bed way earlier than I. But it is important. If any of you have small children or planning on children, it's so important that the parents show a united front, because children are the masters of manipulation, and they will figure out your weaknesses quicker than you even know them yourself. And they will play. Yes, sir?
Just to finish that story, why don't you tell everybody what your son is doing now?
Our son is in the military. He's a captain stationed at Fort Greely, Alaska, so my abusive ways didn't damage him permanently, unless you consider joining the military damage. But he works at Fort Greely, and Fort Greely is our last line of defense against a nuclear attack from North Korea, Iran, wherever. They are called the 300 that protect 300 million people. I'm not telling you anything you can't look up online because I don't know any of the secrets. But basically, he is currently on one of the missile crews. He's the director on one of the crews, and they operate 365 days a year, 24/7. So they have 5 crews at Fort Greely, and Their missiles don't have any attack weapons. They have a bullet. They don't have warheads. They have a bullet on the end of them. And any of you old enough to know Reagan and his discussion of Star Wars and how people laughed at that whole thing, basically this is Star Wars. So they can see anything launched from Earth, they can watch it, and then they have to figure out how many minutes they have before they launch the anti-ballistic missile to blow the incoming missile up in space before it hits our atmosphere. So it's kind of strange why in Alaska, because if you look at the curvature of the Earth, North Korea's missiles are going to go over Alaska. Most missiles will go over Alaska. So the main, like where they train the military is in Colorado Springs, and the Fort Greely is the only Army base in the U.S. Army base that is part of the space and missile defense program. So they're the only Army soldiers that can earn space badges. So it's kind of cool. So all the discipline that I enforced on him as a child, he's still living, and obviously has 3 children of his own. But it's amazing how, I don't know if any of you are grandparents, it's amazing how all of a sudden, and I would always check with my kids because I was so afraid that I would harm them because of my own childhood. So I asked them as adults, did you enjoy your childhood? Was there something I could have done better? No, Mom, you were a great mom, you blah, blah, blah. But now that he's a parent, all of a sudden Grandma doesn't know how to be a parent, There's a whole new set of rules, like raising children has changed, I don't know. But back to his family. So there really are only 2 things that Tracy and I seriously argue about. I mean, we may use a short tone with each other here and again when we're tired or frustrated, whatever, and we've never had like a knockout, drag-out fight. It just never happened, and it really shocked me, and this is again another grace from God. As much as he traveled and had the opportunity to meet other women and whatever, I never was jealous. I never worried about, oh my God, what is he doing away from me, because before meeting him, I was a little bit, not obsessive, but more of a jealous type. But something about him was completely different, and I do believe it was the grace of God that this was meant to be, because, we came from different environments. He was from Texas. I grew up in the mean streets of LA, go ahead.
So one thing about my upbringing, again, I became Catholic when I was in 5th grade, but my parents were married at the ripe old age. Dad was 19 and my mom was 14. Had 5 kids by the time she was 22.
And they didn't have to get married. It wasn't
Yeah.
like a shotgun wedding.
No, but they went through, had all sorts of extramarital affairs, all sorts, knockdown drag-outs, to the point where they'd point a gun at each other. It was pretty challenging from time to time. And, but with that, you can take something, from something bad and turn it into something positive. The one thing that, I was determined was that I wasn't going to be in that kind of marriage, so it's helped me a lot, if I start to get frustrated or whatever, just to think back as a, 15, 16-year-old and being in some of those situations and saying, really, do I want to go down that path? And so I think that's been a blessing for me as well.
So the 2 things we do argue about is we've supported his father has since passed, but we have been the Newman welfare system for his parents since before we got married, because they were all people on welfare. I'm like, you're on the Newman welfare. But anyway, so we supported them. When we got ready to get married, they lived in Texas, we were in California. Tracy and I paid for our wedding, our reception, everything. So it was, because we were paying, we made the decision of what, bridesmaids and groomsmen were going to wear, how to decorate the hall that we rented. And, I think our whole wedding cost us like $2,500. And it was we invited family and friends, and it was,
Probably about 100 people.
Yeah, but we had friends, family members make the hors d'oeuvres, and we hired some people from the office that he worked at to help serve and all that stuff. But Tracy's mom, because when I say this is her baby, I mean, this man could have started a fire in their house, burned everything to the ground, and the mother would have said, "Isn't he a great fire starter?" She would have been celebrating his ability to burn the house down, not what the heck happened. I mean, he can do no wrong. Trust me on that one. So everything was great. Like, Tracy sent me out to meet his mom and dad by myself, only the second airplane ride I'd ever been on, a month after we started dating, because his father was giving him a car. So his,
Giving.
oh, yeah, okay. So, yeah, giving
We were
his.
picking up a car that we probably paid for twice,
Right.
so.
So
A
it was a
Corvette.
Corvette. So
Yeah.
his mom was going to drive out with his little brother who they had adopted, and he was not even 2 yet. So we wedged that child between the seats, because Corvettes are not 4-seaters, they're 2-seaters. We wedged that child way back before all the laws of safety happened. I don't even think you had to wear a seatbelt back then, but that child was wedged really good in between the 2 seats. His mother didn't even know how to pump gas, which I could not relate to. And I had to drive out from Texas to California, which is a 24-hour drive if you don't stop. I had to pump the gas because she had no clue how to do that. But anyway, and we were fine. It wasn't until he called them 3 months into our relationship to announce that we were getting married that things went downhill fast, because I was the evil city woman. I don't know if any of you are I Love Lucy fans, but when Ernest, in the I Love Lucy episodes, somebody comes from Tennessee and his mom told him not to be vamped by no city woman. I was the city woman that was stealing her little baby away. So all of a sudden I was enemy number one. And like a week before the wedding, before they flew out, they asked if we could change the date because it wasn't convenient for them. And
Obviously, we said no.
yeah, because here we are, because that would have been a deal breaker, I'm pretty sure. So, but they sat in the front row of the church like this the whole time, like they were watching somebody being murdered, right? And it wasn't until, even when I was pregnant with our first son, they were like, well, we're not going to get attached to him because we're never going to see him, and blah, blah, blah. Just kind of hurtful things. And I always believed in killing people with kindness, because then if you're kind to people who are mean to you, what happens is they look like an idiot, and it's on them. If they can't, and it wasn't fake kindness. Oh my gosh, you look so beautiful today. It was genuine kindness. Like if they needed a new washer dryer, I told Trace, we need to get them a new washer and dryer. I called them on every anniversary, every birthday, every Mother's Day, every Father's Day, called them at least once a month to see how they were doing. How could they not like me? I mean, come on, I'm Cindy. But once they met justice, then I had them hooked. But
So one thing that we did have some discussion about, I won't say it was complete arguments, but maybe a few months after we were married, I was questioning the marriage, because we got married in Torrance, and there was the priest was named Father McHugh. He was about this tall, from Irish, with a heavy Irish brogue.
we're not even sure we could understand what he was saying.
And when he talked, he had the microphone in his mouth. So we got married like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. That morning, of course, I had to go play golf, and had to test the beer out on the golf course, and then actually went to the hall across the street from the church, and we had a couple of kegs of beer for that. And so I tested that out. And so I wasn't exactly sure I was sober enough to really make the right decision at that time. And but 34 years later,
I explained
guess
to
it's a
him,
grace.
even if the marriage was invalid, we have the common law marriage at this point. So, but he's not getting out of it that easy. So the one thing we would fight about was when his parents would take advantage of, opening credit cards. I'd come home and find a bill for a credit card that I knew I didn't have, because I really believed in paying cash, not living on credit. So we'd have arguments about that. And it wasn't his fault, but it would piss me off, I'm not going to lie. And then the other thing is putting things together. I'm very mechanical. I can look at a box of putting furniture together, and I can put it together. He's not. His strength is business. My strength is mechanical. Like I installed our garbage disposal. I fixed dishwashers, the washing machine. I do that because I like doing that stuff. and it just comes easy to me. He's not. I bought him a new remote control that I thought would be really easy for him, and even today I still have to kind of walk him through it. So it's learning our strengths and our weaknesses. His strength is business, and he's a lot more organized than I am. A lot more, like a lot more.
Yeah.
So,
Night and day.
yeah. But those are the only two things that would cause us to have more than a few little, like, whatever. Not, I mean, it would be like, we would get frustrated. I'll give you a prime example. Our son's first Christmas, we lived in a rented house that was old, and the roof for the front window kind of slanted down. So we buy our Christmas tree at the Christmas tree lot. We bring it home. It's too tall to fit there, but that's where I want the Christmas tree. So Tracy gets out the saw and saws the base of the tree. Well, he sawed it crooked, so now the tree is like this. So then he saws it again, now it's like this. Then he saws it again, now it's too narrow to fit in the tree base. So then he takes a drill and he's drilling holes in this Christmas tree to put big screws in to make it sit. By the end of it, he was pissed off, I was angry, and I won't use the one word, I'll use the F. I said, well, Merry effing Christmas to you too. I was like so done with it. So that's really the only time we've fought. And we've relocated from our original location of Torrance, California. We moved from Torrance, California to an apartment in Burbank. From there, we moved to the ghetto. We thought it was an up-and-coming neighborhood. We should have noticed the drug barricades. We should have noticed the prostitution around the corner. We should have noticed the house that was shot out across the street from us. Like, those would have been really good warning signs, but we were so happy to buy our first house.
Well, because we were buying a townhouse that was
Yeah.
like $200,000, where the 800 square foot houses were $325,000.
So,
And just, that transition story, it really never took place in
No,
the neighborhood.
because I've gone back to California many
Yeah.
times. I'll drive through that neighborhood. I'm like, yeah, it looks the same. So much for that transition. But then we moved from LA to Fort Worth after he lost his job at Standard Brands. Standard Brands was going under, and he was one of the last guys to lose his job. So we said, well, let's move to Texas. And he was going to start his own manufacturer's rep business. We weren't in the Fort Worth area for less than a month, and he ended up getting a job in San Antonio, which is 5 hours away. So now we're living apart.
It was a week.
Yeah. And then so we sold the house. We moved to San Antonio. From San Antonio, we moved, after he lost his job in San Antonio, we moved back to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we really, at this point, we tried to find a house that was over an hour from his parents. So there was no drop-ins. Unfortunately, they found a shortcut. So they would plop in the house. I'm still in my PJs. We're teaching, because I didn't feel I need to get dressed if the kids and I are learning at home, just be relaxed. And I'm like, oh, your parents are here. What do you mean they're here? I said, yeah, they just popped over. Yeah, so I felt like I had to, because I don't know about you guys, but in Texas, there's this whole, and his mother is one of these women. I mean, I love her to death now, but one of these women that takes 4 or 5 hours to get ready in the morning. You see how I am, right? If I wear makeup, that's like a 5-minute extra work. And so here I am in my PJs, and here she comes all perfectly coiffed and everything, and I'm like, okay, so now I got to get up early and dress and do all those things I don't want to do. And then from Dallas-Fort Worth, the kids played ice hockey. They got invited to play in Michigan. So playing AAA is like the highest level for kids hockey. So we rented a townhome in Michigan. Tracy still traveled a lot. It didn't matter where we lived, because he just needed a place to rest his head because he was traveling all the time. So then from Michigan, we moved to Wisconsin. A lot of this time we lived apart for the majority, other than when he'd come home on the weekends. And then finally, he had been, I think, 1 year in North Carolina. He stayed at the Hampton Inn so long, so like half of a year's worth of stays at Hampton Inn, that he earned like diamond membership. So then we decided to move to North Carolina.
And so for 2 years at the Hampton Inn, I'd stayed over 165 nights at one hotel.
Yeah.
So
then
we knew
now,
each other very well.
so now living under the same roof for the first time in I don't know how many years, we had to adjust. It was like newlyweds again, because he had his routine, I had my routine, and, We did it.
And it was the first time that we we actually relocated without kids. Because the kids were, our daughter was in a prep school and our son was at college. And so,
We didn't give them the address.
yeah,
We didn't. We told them, we'll give you the address when we need you to come home.
yeah.
And unfortunately for our daughter, she had to take the PSATs, and you need to put your address on it. And so the principal gave her the address, and I guess she was embarrassed. And he said, you might want to tell her your address. I said, fine, I guess. So, but yes, it's the first time we didn't have them involved in purchasing a house, nothing. So it was for me, it was in a way kind of being newlyweds again, right? No children, moving into a new house, right? The whole 9 yards. And then I had stepped away from the Catholic Church for a while when all the information was coming out about the priests, even though most of, if not all of that happened a couple of decades ago. It's still, because of how I grew up being abused, it really bothered me. So I just couldn't figure out a way to get back into the church with comfort. So he would go to church, and I know he felt bad because I wouldn't go with him. And then when I talked to the head priest who was here at the time, after that discussion, then I was able to come back and regain my faith, and actually my faith has grown tremendously. You know, even though I've always believed in God and always knew he was with me, I just couldn't reconcile the whole scandal with what I had gone through. And I recognize now that not all priests are that way, and you know, it's not right to hold every priest, or more importantly, the church responsible for the actions of some priests who, again, free will of man, right, made the choices that they did. But I'm glad that I came back, and our faith has grown tremendously, and it is so important to have God in the vocation of marriage, to recognize how important he is in your life when you get married, through tribulations. Like, I thank God, even through struggles, I thank him. Like, I wish that my life had been different? Everybody, right? But you find that, like, when I talk to teenagers and they're bitching about, oh, mom won't let me do this, blah, blah, blah. I said, are you being abused? If you're being abused, I will step in a heartbeat. But if you're mad because mom won't let you go to all your friends' houses or whatever, she's a little stricter than others, get over it. And I explain to teenagers, I talk to a lot of teenagers, primarily in the church, I tell them, you can't control what happens to you as a child, but as you become 15, 16, 17 years old and on, you have the ability to choose what path you're going to go down. And so I made a choice because statistically, I should have been in prostitution, I should have been a teenage mom, I should have had children from a variety of men, I should have been homeless, I should have been on drugs based on my childhood. And I chose none of that, and that is because of God's grace. And that's why God gave me him.
So one thing that I will tell you, if you're not married and you're thinking about getting married soon, I did not have this opportunity because Cindy was, I did not meet her mother, her birth mother, for probably 15 years after we were married.
Oh, no,
But spend a lot of time with your in-laws or future in-laws and look at them and say, okay, in 20 years, I'm going to get someone in between though. Because no matter what, it's going to be someone in between that mother and father. And take a look, really think about it, because that's what you're going to end up living with.
And now that I get along with his mom, I've thanked her so many times for raising Tracy the way she did. Because I have to acknowledge that even though she and I didn't get along, she raised an amazing son. He is an amazing cook. He can go in the cabinet and find a few leftovers in the refrigerator and make a pretty edible meal. There's only been a couple of times that I haven't enjoyed his cooking. One time was when he made chili so hot it ate through the styrofoam bowls that he was serving it with. That would be one time. But overall, and I have to say that I've never known a man to be so giving and loving and patient and nurturing as Tracy, especially because I have a lot of health issues. And to be so patient with me when I can't do the things that a normal housewife should do. You know, he's always been there, and I know this is after working long hours. You know, he'll come home and take care of me.
Well, no, you know, you hear people say that marriage is 50-50. It's really not. It should be 100%, as much as you can give all the time. And so, do you have a question? Oh,
She was just stretching. She's
Okay.
like, don't point me out.
So I guess one of the things I would ask is, does anyone have any questions or that you'd like to know about 34 years of marriage?
And I'm open, I don't, like, obviously I'm able to talk about my childhood because it's like anybody else would talk about their childhood. Mine was just a little different, but no questions? I have all the answers.
So, Father Mark, would you like to
Are we done?
take it? Yeah.
Just to say that we thank you. Marriage is, as I mentioned in the introduction, is one of the 7 sacraments of the church, and it's a covenant relationship. In the eyes of the state, a couple has to produce or to present a marriage license, or if they're already married and they're getting the church's blessing, they have to present that. It is, in a sense, in the view of the state, a contract. There's no marriage preparation for civil marriage. But we do have marriage preparation for a sacramental marriage because it's seen until death do us part to the couple. And so, again, it's a very solemn commitment. It's joyful, and it's a discernment. And we believe God is the matchmaker, just in his whole sense of providence, of bringing you together. And so, again, it's something that you don't jump into, but to be ready for. One of the joys I have as a pastor, and I've officiated at least 400 marriages in the last 27 years or so, but one of the joys for me as a pastor is to see couples that I have officiated their marriage to being active in the church and having the children baptized, and then even the children growing up in the church. That's a joyful thing. You know, out of those 400 couples that I've officiated their marriages, there's a good number of them I never saw them the day after the marriage, ever. And I mean, even in the same parish, it wasn't like I was somewhere else. It was like they had this big marriage and big ceremony. Sometimes I felt like I was just an actor in the movie they were making. You know, they got all their videographers and photographers and everything. Never see them again. Had one groom one time when they were building the Bobcats arena in Charlotte. And he was so jovial and everything during the marriage prep. He said, "Father, do you like going to the NBA games?" And I said, "You know, I've been to a couple times." He said, "Well, I'm selling the sky boxes in the new arena, and we don't have them all sold yet. So once we get this thing built, I'm going to call you up and give you some tickets to go up to the sky box. They have food, beverages, watch the NBA game." After the wedding, I never heard from him again. I never got my skybox seats in the Bobcats arena. But it is joyful when I see a couple and then that have their marriage, and then I see them here in the church afterwards. That's very joyful to know that they really took something to heart, that this is a part of a living faith. You've enriched us, and again, you both are very practical. And most of our own couples, our own families, our parents and grandparents, they can relate to struggles. Some of them went through wars and economic hardships, and even the sense of illnesses or kids that got into the wrong crowd and all of these types of things. But again, to persevere through marriage, and also to have it's good to have a sense of humor. I can think of my mother, who could be, both of my parents are deceased, but I can think of my mother could be pretty sarcastic at times. One time my parents were having an argument, and my father was trying to change the subject, and he said, "Do you see my new watch? It's good for 100 meters below the water." And my mother said, why don't you go right now and test it? Well, we're just about out of time. So next week, this is one of the sacraments of the church. We're going to cover all 7 before Easter. Next week, our topic will be really on morality, looking at the 10 Commandments and an application for our lives. And when the 10 Commandments go back to the Exodus from Egypt, and Moses received those, really, according to Scripture, engraved by the hand of God. And so, a long time ago, thousands of years ago, but how do we apply them to our lives today? So that will be 1 week, and next week then I'll have the schedule for February as well. Okay? Well, let's just have a little prayer. Eternal and gracious God, you called men and women together in this holy sacrament of marriage, and really the blessings of their parents, if the Lord blesses them with children, and then to see even their children's children and even beyond. So may keep them safe and healthy and always open to your call and the call of faith. And the blessings of God on all of you, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Good night, and just with the rain itself or the cold rain, just to be careful on your drive home.
Since there's no snow, just drive as fast.
We had, the question was about the weekend schedule. We had more than normal on Saturday. I think some people were anticipating with the forecast. So Saturday night was maybe 150 or so more than normal. But then for 5 masses on Sunday, we had a total of 40. And at noon, there was only 1 person. So we had at least 1 at every mass. But we only had 40 for the whole day. So, that sleet and that buildup, and it's just really slick conditions. But hopefully this weekend will be better.
Yeah, they canceled the snow.
Okay, and I've got, have your wife this morning?
Yeah.
This came during Advent. I was so running around. I finally printed it out and sat down and read it. Maybe we can get a cup of coffee, or maybe better a cold beer, and take some notes. It basically just took incredible work with these guys and explained the letter. Clarification from it. But at least you can read, there's different sections for the different, those things that you check off, like a different type of letter. So you look at it, we'll sit down together and work out the vocabulary. Wednesday's a good, because we generally don't have many meetings on Wednesday. We have Tuesday, we have Finance Council, sometimes we have Liturgy Commission, and sometimes I'm meeting with bride and grooms on Tuesday. Thursday is RCIA. Now, Friday, actually, we only have 1 wedding in February, so I don't have any rehearsals but 1 Friday. So Friday is good too. So with your work schedule and all that.
Yeah, okay, so,
As long as I don't have a wedding, Fridays are usually good.
so I'll text you
Okay.
some Fridays.
Oh,
and
that's
we'll
that's
figure
great.
it
I'm looking forward to it.
out. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
thank you.
Okay.
I actually had made printouts, but I didn't.
I'll tell you what, you could, if they're in your, you could send them to me, we'll put them on the list. Okay, let me get you the notes. It was on oh wait, you were, last Deacon Joe talked about praying with Scripture. Let me, I'm going to get him to put that on the, you got the one on the Corporal Works of Mercy? That was 2 weeks ago. No, but did you get the one from 2 weeks ago? Okay. I'll get it for you for next week because